I believe we're ready to begin. Is there any public comments? Who's leading us off?
Yep. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Chair stuck up there. There we go. My name is Jonathan Harper. I serve as Science Curriculum Supervisor, and I'm also filling in for Carolyn Evans while she's on leave. And so I'm just here to introduce the agenda today. So good morning, Reverend Matthias, Ms. Downs-Lewis, and Mr. Ross. Thank you for having me here this morning. We have a couple of two agenda items. First, we will have a report around Burton Elementary Technology Initiative. And so we have Matthew Beresford, Allison Woodside, and Jen Migelski to speak about that. Then secondly, we have a Culture, Diversity, Equity, Inclusion report, and that's going to be Dr. Maida Gunnell and Malika Brown. So,
Okay, great.
thank you. So I think Burton Elementary's up first.
Morning.
Excited to be here. Once again, my name is Allison Woodside. I am the principal at Burton Elementary, and this is Jen Migelski.
I'm a fifth grade teacher at Burton Elementary.
So we actually have prepared a presentation along the lines of technology. So if you guys wouldn't mind looking behind you, it's kind of the guidelines for what we're going to be taking a look at today. I know that we had prepared a handout, but I tried to simplify it a little bit through this presentation that we've created. So just an overview of Burton and kind of the initiative that we've been able to start. Our mission is to educate, equip, and empower all students. We were awarded a Connect Ed grant in 2014 that Jen actually wrote that enabled all of our students to have one-to-one iPads. And since then, we've actually been able to roll out equipment with our teachers and every single one of our students. It's been a really great thing to have, and we really look forward to continue growing and learning through this initiative. So the goals and objectives that we have with this technology is really embedded within our improvement plan and our transformation plan as well, which includes just general training for the teachers. Obviously, when you roll out a technology initiative, you're going to have varied level of abilities with the technology itself. So we've really had to kind of dig into different levels of training for everyone. Classroom observations, technology is definitely something that's included within those now as well. We also maintain monthly PD around technology, CPLs, which is a collaborative professional learning environment that we have once a week after school, has also technology embedded into it, our lesson planning and our data analysis. So really what we've tried to do, especially this year, is embed technology into every facet of what we do at Burton. We really don't want it to be something that's separate. Our objective is that it's something that's seamlessly integrated within our everyday work environment. With our students, it's been really fantastic. Jen will elaborate a little bit more on this, but we've really seen our learning environment shift. It's much more active now that we've been able to integrate the iPads and the technology into our environment, and we see a lot more motivation and excitement around learning. We have some student examples for you guys as well, so you can see hands-on what that's been looking like. We've also been blessed to be able to work with the Apple Store. Their staff has come out to do different training with our students, not just with our teachers, but our students as well. So they've come out to do coding, they've come out to do video production, and so that's been really great as well for our students to interact with others that are professionals in the field. And it's been great too because students are not only teaching each other about technology, so we'll have a fifth grade classroom work with a third grade classroom, but we also have students who work with teachers. So Jen has actually been leading a tech team of students who, a few times a year will go around and help teachers out with any issues that they may be having. And then kind of within this, college and career ready standards, these students know how to use technology and they will be ready for variety of things that will be presented to them in the future. Jen, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
I just wanted to add too, where you said the fifth grade students are helping like third grade students and vice versa. So we also have third grade students that learn a specialty technique or a specialty skill on the iPad, and then they will teach the fifth grade students as well. So it's kind of intergenerational, I guess, if you will. And I had a student the other day who mentioned they couldn't imagine going back to learning without the iPads because it's just such an integral part of their day. Excuse me. And it gives them such a voice and variety to choose how they show their learning. So that's been a big shift for them as well.
In terms of teachers, they, like Jen was just alluding to, have really been able to customize not only their own learning experiences, so how we do professional development within our staff, but also the learning experiences of our students. So there's much more choice in terms of how they learn and how they present now that we have access to all of this technology, which has been fantastic. It's also been much easier, you know, at Burton we have a lot of second language learners, we have a lot of students who haven't had the opportunity to expand beyond their community, and really using the technology also opens up their world. They can do virtual field trips, they can do all sorts of exciting things that really they wouldn't have been able to experience, and it's giving them that background knowledge that without it, it would have been much harder for us to show them. We also do, like I said, monthly professional development with the teachers, where we actually shifted the setup a little bit this year, where we'll have different focuses. So it'll be a strategy using one of the applications or the iPads, and then they flip-flop. So we have teachers teaching teachers. So instead of having it be an external person that comes in, we're teaching each other how to use these devices, and that's been a really positive experience thus far. We've also really dug into, in general pedagogy, they use depth of knowledge, they used all these different sorts of phrases for best practices, and technology actually has its own theory that's called the SAMR model, and we'll show you and talk about that a little bit more as well, but we've been able to integrate that into our curriculum as well. Again, there's more training through Apple Classroom, Apple Certified Teachers. There's just a lot of resources out there in terms of quality training for teachers. And then, like I had mentioned before, we've really been able to integrate technology into all of the different elements of what we do at Burton for our teachers as well.
Yeah, I can speak to the data analysis as well. I wholeheartedly admit that I was not a data lover for many of my years. The more I play with some of the apps and programs that we have available to our students, the more I have grown to love data, because they all produce data, and I love to kind of compile them, and they all match up. You know what I mean? So it tells me that they are valid in their what they're testing the kids on and what their skills are being assessed on. And so since the iPads, I've analyzed more data than I think I have in all of my years as a teacher.
And it really allows the teachers to be in more than one place at one time. It takes differentiation to a whole new level. We'll have, we pull small groups, and a teacher is able to have recorded different lessons on the iPad to give to the other groups that they're not sitting with. So even if they're not with the teacher, they are still receiving a lesson from the teacher that they can then pause and rewind and replay as many times as they need to understand the content and do the work assigned.
What does your prep time look like? Because that's a lot of technology, especially if you're differentiating. How do you find the time to be able to do that?
I do a lot of it at home.
So that's beyond the school day.
Yeah, so during our specials times, a lot of times we'll do what Allison was just saying, where we're presenting a lesson to the iPad to then leave in front of them like you have at a station, and then the kids know to listen to it. So we're recording those sorts of things and getting those ready, or we're reading text into the iPad to get it ready for kids to work on fluency. It has changed how our prep time looks. And a lot of times we close our doors because we sound silly in our classrooms talking out loud when no one's in there because we're recording ourselves.
I would say in terms of prep as well, one thing that I've noticed a little bit more big picture is I see more collaboration at the grade levels as well. Teachers really working together. I think it's shifted our prep time to be working smarter, not harder to a certain extent. Where teachers are like, hey, we're going to do this lesson. I've prepared this really great presentation. Let's share this amongst ourselves, and let's work on this. Or, hey, this is my area of expertise. I'm going to create a really great element that we can all use in our upcoming lesson. And so, I think the first few years, it is it has been extra time trying to get used to it, but we know that moving forward, it's going to get theoretically, I don't want to say easier and easier, but it will be, we'll have everything pre-prepared, I guess you could say, and just make edits as we go.
And for collaboration as well, so we do switches for science and social studies. So I get kids from other classes that come into my room, and we'll do things in my room, and then they go back to their classroom and say, hey, Mrs. Migalski did this cool Nearpod. Why don't you ever do those? And then that teacher comes to me and says, what's a Nearpod? Then we sit down and work on it. So it's the kids are kind of selling it themselves and getting the teachers motivated to learn new things and figure these out.
With your ELL, how are you working with parents, for example? Do the kids take the iPads home and?
They do not. No. One of the ways that we're working with our ELLs is, I know for myself, I communicate with the parents a lot through Class Dojo, and we'll show you that. And Class Dojo has a component built into it that translates for parents. So I know I have like 23 parents, plus I have mentors hooked up to my Class Dojo, so everyone knows what's going on in the classroom every day. We keep a little diary of what we've worked on. And we'll show you some more examples, too, of how we use the technology for our ELL students.
So this is just kind of an example of what I was referring to in terms of Bloom's taxonomy and depth of knowledge. Those are, common academic terms that we use, but now what they've done is kind of shift that into incorporating technology. So it's a very similar way of thinking, but now it's really using verbiage that connects to technology usage. And so this is just a really great example that we have, and it gives different examples of apps that are then related to the verbs at the different levels of thinking. So substitution is just simply kind of when you take technology and have it do exactly what you were going to do on paper, but using the technology. Then you move into augmentation, where it's similar to substitution, but you would add another element where the student would have to interact with whatever they had just created. And then in modification and redefinition, that's when you're really having the students step up to create. And that's the piece that we've been talking about as a staff as well, is how do we get the students to transfer? Because we can substitute as much as we want, we can augment as much as we want, but how do we get them to really retain that information? And that's where those next two pieces of modification and redefinition come in to help our students transfer that knowledge into lifelong learning.
Yeah, and that's the focus of our PD for staff this year. The first year it was pretty easy for everybody to understand the substitution component and to get used to the iPads and figuring out what they can do. And now we're upping the game a little bit and having teachers learn how students can show their learning rather than just do their learning. So.
And these, I won't go into too much detail, but these are just further examples of how that can be broken down and interpreted and used in planning, especially, and thinking about how we're implementing the technology.
So this is just K through 5th?
Yes.
So,
And pre-K, actually. So our pre-K rooms do have access to the iPads as well.
answer this, but what happens with 6th through 8th?
Well, I would say that because now we're incorporating the Chromebooks, this can still be something that, just because we have iPads and then they would move on to using Chromebooks in middle school, they can still apply a lot of the same concepts. Through Chromebooks, they can still do a lot of this creation. They can still do a lot of these things. And what we're noticing is that once the kids kind of have experience with the iPads, it's easier for them to move to other types of technology. A lot of times we, say that Macs are probably the most complicated. So once you start with those, you're able to kind of transfer in between the different structures as well. So, as long as they still have access to it, I think they're really going to be a step ahead of the game in terms of how to use it and how to really showcase it.
And I think that same thing that I was talking about will happen. They'll go to middle school and they'll say, oh, like in 5th grade, I used this to show my learning. Can I do that? And teachers need to be open to, sure, show me,
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone back there can answer that question. So how are you guys taking the technology that you're starting off in pre-K through 5th and then building on to 6th through 8, whether it's the middle school upstairs at Burton or
I know Discovery Ed.
high school?
Yeah.
So this is, it's a great question. And
Yeah, what's the plan?
Yep, so As we move into integration of technology across the district, right? Burton was one of the first schools with this program to be able to put iPads in pre-K through 5. But when we look at our technology plan for the rest of the district, we have a plan for technology from kindergarten through 12th grade. And looking up into middle school, the plan is to have one-to-one access to devices in 6 through 12 classrooms. And so as Ms. Migelski and Ms. Woodside mentioned, when the students have the opportunity to work with the technology in K through 5, that transition into middle school, they'll be, when they walk into the 6th grade classroom, they'll have access to those tools. The process right now that we are in working to implement is the science discovery ed component that was presented to Achievement Committee last year, and then the intent is to also put those devices into the other core content areas as well. So, and we're working towards that. It's a process with a lot of moving parts, but the intent is then that these students that matriculate up can take those skills that they've learned in the elementary grades and apply them in the middle school as well.
Yeah, it just seems, my concern is that they're getting this great exposure or even thinking creatively and so forth, then they're going to middle school. And there's a lag there. Or am I wrong?
Well, there could be, right, if we didn't have the technology, and I think that's what we're trying to, that's our process, is putting that technology in classrooms, training staff, training principals. We're working together as a team so that we can do that technology integration into the core curriculum, right? So that students have the ability to do those creative things, learn those 21st century skills with access, right? In the past, that would have been correct. We wouldn't have had access to that level of technology at the middle school, but now we will.
Mm-hmm. And adding to that, to be perfectly honest, one of the things we've noticed is the teacher training takes time. If it's going to be implemented well, it is worth it to take time to train the teachers first. Because, I think trying to get them, their technology without them having a full understanding of how to use it and time to really process it. Our teachers have had their MacBooks now for 2 years. 2 years. And, we're still working on that training piece. And so it's really, really integral that they feel not completely comfortable, because let's face it, part of integrating technology is there's always going to be some level of discomfort. And it's the recognition of that, but making sure that they have the basis to before then they take it to the students.
I agree 100%.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Yep.
Okay.
So one of the other big things that we wanted to talk about was just how this has shaped our relationships with our parents and our community members as well. It's been really great, actually. So I would say last year we did, kind of like we did with teachers, we did a lot of prep. So our parent meetings in the mornings or in the evenings would actually be on every month or two. We would bring the technology to the parents and have them interacting with it. Most of our parents, many of our parents don't speak English. We have parents who are illiterate, who have never worked with technology. And so really one of the things we realized quickly is, we have to teach them the basics. And so while we offer computer classes at Burton, and we do have parents who take those, on a much larger scale, we would bring iPads into our parent meetings and literally teach parents how to use them. In the same way of how to use their smartphone, because many times a smartphone mimics what an iPad looks like as well. And so, in the way that we kind of had to step back and make sure we got our teachers training, we had to do the same thing and really look into how we train our parents. And I think that's once again, that's an ongoing piece. Once a month training the parents, I don't think will ever be enough, but it was a start to get them exposed to what we were doing with our students in class. This year, what we're doing is actually shifting it a little bit to make it more hands-on with the students, because one of the things that we realized is just like our students struggle to learn in isolation, so do our parents. So one of the big pushes that we have is that students are coming and doing events with their parents to teach their parents how how they are using the iPad to show the parents the things that they are creating. So even our writing workshop or our writing gallery and our reader night are now going to have a technology shift and focus to them this year, so that the students are showing the parents and teaching the parents along with them. We also have been able to work with different groups like Affinity Mentoring. So they are the mentoring group, and I actually just finished a training a couple weeks ago on training the mentors how to work with their students around literacy, but using technology. So I brought in the iPads, and we did a lesson using technology as well, so they would also be exposed to the different things that we're doing and different ways they could work with the students as well. So it's really been a great thing to see how the community really values this, you can tell, and the kids talk about it, and it's just been a really wonderful effect to see school-wide.
Yeah, they're much more anxious to show their parents what they've created on the iPad than to show them a piece of paper.
And then in terms of implementation, which we have hinted to a little bit, the teachers were given their devices a year before the students were, so they had a whole round of training even before the students were given their own devices, which was really integral. I don't know if you want to, what kind of training you were doing during that time.
I think it was really, we were anxious to get the devices in the kids' hands, but Apple was very intentional on making sure we understood our devices first. So they kind of, put a hold on that until we were ready. And now looking back on that, I'm extremely grateful that they did that, because my level of comfort showed in my teaching of to the kids on, how to do things. But also they knew that, okay, I'm not 100% sure on how to do this. Let's try it and figure it out. And they learned that that's okay. And then in turn, I think their parents are learning that as well, where the parents are a little scared to do things online and communication-wise with teachers, but it's getting there, so they're not so afraid of making mistakes anymore. But that was an integral part of our rollout, was having the teachers fully trained before, I don't want to say fully, but comfortable with their devices, before we rolled out the kids' devices.
Yeah, it seems like that's really important.
It is.
As you guys are looking at building this to really take into account that we have to make sure that we have enough time to teach our staff in order to feel comfortable enough to hand it and go over.
Right, because if the staff isn't comfortable using their devices, they're going to do the bare minimum with them. Whereas we are so comfortable, I think we sit at home, and as part of our lesson design now is we think, okay, how can I tweak this to integrate technology, and then how can I tweak what the outcome is so that the kids can use the technology to show me what they learned. That's just a natural process for us now, but it's taken time.
With implementation as well, digital citizenship was one of the big things that we ended up pushing, so we even moved out our student rollout to give ourselves an extra month to prep the students with how to be responsible on the internet. And we actually did train the parents on this as well. What does acceptable internet use look like? What are different productive sites that the students can be using? How do you have conversations with your students around this? And the teachers did that with students as well. And then, like I said, in terms of implementation, we have monthly PD. In January and February, we're starting peer observations as well, where we're going to match up teachers together to then begin to observe each other and learn from each other. And thinking back, I think some of the smartest things that we did is we slowed things down a little bit. So we made sure that the student rollout didn't happen right away, and we pushed that out. We made sure to go and do as much pre-training as possible before we moved on to putting the iPads in the students' hands.
Okay, so we have prepared some demonstrations for you to give you some ideas as to how the kids are using them in the classroom. These are some of the apps that we use currently. We don't have a standard set of apps that every teacher has to use. Everybody kind of has their own way of using things, and some people are moving ahead while some people are still learning the core apps. So this is just a sampling of a few things. Did you want to talk about any of
Yeah, and just, a few of the pieces that I brought up here, Class Dojo has been really big for us. It is an app that allows teachers and parents and students to all communicate, and it's really been fantastic in showing the parents what we're doing on a daily basis in our classrooms, what we're learning, and so that's been really wonderful. Seesaw is also something we'll show you guys some examples from this, so you have a better idea. That has been really great to create student portfolios, but also demonstrate teacher work as well in terms of how they're giving lessons to students. And one thing I do want to note is that, because we have iPads, we are blessed with being able to say we have all these apps, but a lot of what these apps do can be applied to other types of technology. So, Pages is a Word document, so there are different ways that you can use it that you would see whether it's Pages or Word. Book Creator, there are, a lot of these things that you can go through can be used via different devices as well. We just, again, are very lucky to have
the Apple
ecosystem. Exactly. So just an example, we won't show the whole video because I know we're running out of time, but for example, even from an administrative standpoint, I do Monday morning videos that I push out to all of our entire classroom. I'm going to say we can play a piece of it.
If you look up here in the corner for each of these next slides, it shows you what we're using to create these things.
I don't know how loud it's going to be.
Good morning, Burton Elementary. Today is Monday, December 11th, 2017.
So what's really great about that is, even like I said, for our language learners, we can put subtitles in. I incorporate academic vocabulary every week that we challenge the students to use. So we have Woodside's word wall is some of the phrases that the kids are using. So even from all aspects, we're trying to just really kind of flood the school with technology. And as far as I know, the kids are pretty entertained.
They love it. And she embeds little clips, like in this one, there's a clip of the holiday performance, so that the kids get to see that weren't there, and it's just kind of cool.
We integrate True Success as well. We work with them, so I also talk about self-control. That's the theme for the month. So we try and bring in all of the different pieces of what we're working on as a school.
Okay, well, you start this one off.
So we were also really excited when we were presented with the opportunity to work with the community on Children in Nature, redesign Plaster Creek Park, and they wanted to bring in students. And so we actually had students who did a walking audit of the park, made a presentation about what they would want to see. They got to go to the mayor's office to do a presentation. So even on a much larger scale, we've been able to take advantage of the technology, and they were able to do research and interviews and all of these different things. And so that's been really wonderful to see as well.
So the team worked and collected their information and used Google Slides and Keynote, and then we kind of smashed those together into one presentation. But then they also went a step further and made an iMovie trailer to introduce themselves, and you guys need to see this. It's great.
They did this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of the same pictures, but that's okay. So this is what they did before their presentation.
Yeah.
It was the trailer of what they were going to talk about.
Walking audit woman.
Yeah, fantastic crew.
So it's, yeah.
And then they gave their presentation, so it was pretty amazing to see.
Yeah,
very
and the group that was involved at the mayor's office was really taken back by this and impressed that they went that extra step to introduce themselves. So there's some other ways that we've been using it too. Our music program for the holiday was about color. And so the music teacher worked with the art teacher, worked with the regular classroom teachers, and we put together some poems about color that were projected during the presentation. This one, I'll just show you this one, it's my favorite. This is a third grader.
Blue is the color of my tears. Blue is the true color. Blue is the sound of angels. Blue is the color of diamonds. Blue tastes like cotton candy. Blue feels like a beautiful sky. Blue sounds like blueberries. Blue feels like blue jello. Blue makes me think of blue pillows that are soft. Blue is the most popular color.
So they had to talk about their five senses, pick a color and talk about their five senses.
Yeah, and then this one, they did other colors but connected them to the holiday. We can watch it or we can move forward. Just move forward?
Yeah,
Okay.
we have lots of examples. So here are some other examples of, and again, especially these could be used in many different ways. So teachers are able to create their own books that they read aloud, and then the students are able to echo read with their teacher while they are not with the teacher, which is spectacular. They always say practice makes perfect, but it's really perfect practice makes perfect. And so that was always kind of a struggle of how do we have them independently reading, but know that they're doing it well. So this has really helped with that. We have a lot of activities on the left side of how they work with different prefixes and suffixes and base words and are able to manipulate it. And really we know that kind of a lot of that hands-on stuff will help trigger their memory as well to be able to do it that way. And then on the right, there are really cool apps like Post-it Plus that really help with their organizational skills and note-taking and collaboration as well. So just some other ways that we've been able to work with technology.
So the Apple retail staff came in and they did a whole lesson with our kids on coding using spheros. So this little lighted ball right here is a sphero. It's basically a robot, and the kids had to program it with their iPads to tell it what to do. So they're working it through a maze. And then up here, the kids got creative and they were trying to knock things down. This is 7 seconds.
1.
And that was the fifth graders teaching the third graders how to do it. So that was really fun.
And the coding curriculum that Apple has created is actually, I'm pretty sure, free of charge. And they have a coding curriculum for kinder all the way through 12th grade, which is pretty incredible. So we've been able to look at that a little bit more too.
And a lot of these people, because of they come for the Apple things, but they also come back and volunteer in our building, which means a lot to us too. So I want to talk about Dojo. Allison talked about it earlier. This is a way for us to, you can give points for managing behavior. You can take points away if kids are doing things incorrectly. And the kids come up with what they get points for and what they get points taken away for. So they're kind of owning that. Another way that I use it is every single day I post things that we did in the classroom, and parents and mentors alike are connected. And so they can see. I can post videos. I can post pictures.
And it can be private as well. So if there's a student who or family who doesn't want their picture posted, it can be privately messaged to
And
What
families.
they
is
can message
attendance
back.
like?
Say it.
Attendance?
We average between 80 to 90% per month, actually. So we have really wonderful attendance. And last year it did go up. Our overall average increased. And, I do think part of that is because of their engagement. They're excited. They're really excited to come to school. It was good before, but now our attendance, I would say, is great. And that's been really wonderful to see. This is an example of actually one of our transitional bilingual classrooms, a first grade classroom, and how they used video to talk about the life cycle of an apple.
Oh, sorry.
Apple. This is an apple seed. This is an apple tree. This is an apple bud. This is an apple blossom. The last thing is an apple. This is an apple tree. Then it turns into an apple tree, and then on the apple tree, it turns into, it goes into a bud, and then the bud goes into a blossom, and then it turns to an apple, and then the apple it turns back to a seed because the apples have seeds inside.
So cute. Yeah.
You'll be saying bud.
Bud and blossom a lot after you watch that one. But again, I mean, just the way it enriches their vocabulary too, just the way they have to enunciate and speak has really changed the way they interact with it as well. And then, granted, I know we're taking extra time, so I do apologize for that. But Seesaw has been great as well. Like we said, it's a way for teachers to be able to, as we say in the tech world, push out assignments and then also have students record themselves explaining their thinking, explaining how they work through problems, and then the teachers get it back automatically as well. So in many ways, Seesaw has also saved time in terms of like grading and being able to be, like I said, with all the students at once. And so, you know, teachers have said that they'll do fluency with students, and instead of it taking an entire day to get through all the students, they have them all do it at once, and then it takes them 10 minutes to grade. And so I would like to show this one video of one of our students explaining their math homework. Oh, of course.
That's no good.
Yeah. So I think we'll, for lack of time, we were going to have you guys actually experience a Nearpod lesson that we had opened up on your iPads, but we can move to any other questions that you would have, considering that we've already gone a little bit longer than we were supposed to.
Now, will the board get this presentation? Okay.
Or we can come back.
Yeah, we're happy to come back as many times. I mean, it's been an amazing experience, and it makes us excited and giddy when we see the way that the students are working, and for me to see the way the teachers are working and just really pushing themselves to learn more and do more, and it's been a very inspiring thing to experience.
It's a source of pride for us.
Yes, absolutely. Huge source of pride.
That's really exciting.
Any other questions?
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Sorry, Maida. Doesn't want to unscrew.
Thank you again.
Sorry. Hopefully.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Maida Gunnell, and I am here with my colleague Malika Brown, and we are here to update you on the work of the Office of Equity and Inclusion. And you received a report that you had in your packet, and today we have a PowerPoint that is a summary of the report. So I'm going to start off by giving a little bit about the history of the office. The office was established in 2015, and we, Mrs. Brown here, became a full-time person or head of the office, the director of the Office of Equity and Inclusion, in December of 2015. And so, looking back on the journey of what we've done since then, we started by researching what was equity and inclusion. We researched what other districts had done in the field of equity and inclusion. We looked at the work of Denver. We looked at the work that was being done in Minneapolis and other districts around the country. We gathered information on best practices and strategies. We studied and we read a lot. We wanted to know what would be the effects of the themes on students, families, and community and our society as a whole. We needed to know who we were serving, because we have, Grand Rapids Public Schools has a very diverse population, and we wanted to know what was happening with our population. So the board was a part of a presentation that we had at a board retreat. If you remember, it was called Cultural Landscapes. And the board and the cabinet were a part of that. We've also rolled that out to staff members in our district. We also read a book. We had a book study by Gary Howard, and I think you would remember that you were involved in that book study too.
What was the title of that one?
We can't teach what we don't know. I think, Malika, you were going to bring the book, but I think you have the book still,
Yeah,
right?
we all have the book.
So after that, we began to work on a strategic plan where we looked at developing a mission and a vision for our work in the district. That was not done solely by one or two people. That was done, the mission and the vision were developed by looking and talking to our stakeholders, our staff, our administrators, and our teachers, and we went through 7 revisions of the mission and the vision because we wanted to get everyone involved. Then we identified 4 key areas for implementation. One of them is curriculum, and also our workforce. We looked at our workforce, the diversity in our workforce, looked at professional learning, professional development, and also how to become more involved and get the family and community involved in our work. We then looked at developing a policy for equity and inclusion, which, by the way, is a draft policy right now. We have not completed that. It's in the works.
And will we see that draft?
Yes.
See?
Yeah, not today, no.
It's actually in the packet.
Is it in the packet?
The draft is in the packet. That
Draft is in the packet.
I thought so.
So you have it in your packet, but it's a draft. And also, you have in your packet the goals for 17-18. Now, Malika's going to talk to you a little bit more about the 4 focus areas, and she's going to get into greater detail.
So surrounding our mission and vision, we identified the 4 focus areas that Dr. Gunnell mentioned, and starting with curriculum and resources. I'm going to talk a little bit about the work that's being done in each of these 4 areas to date. So curriculum and resources, or in your packet, it's called curriculum materials. We're committed to, as a district, providing equitable education to all students, and we feel that curriculum resources play a huge part in that. So we have been studying the work of several researchers around critical race theory, culture responsive teaching, and landed on a book called Culture Responsive Teaching and the Brain by Zaretta Hammond. So we are doing that book study with the curriculum team, and I call them the curriculum team extended. So the 5 curriculum supervisors, along with 7 or 8 other people who actually touch curriculum. So we have
Is that book listed here?
And that information is in your packet, page 3, and then page 4 of 4 in your packet.
Yeah, I see that.
Right, and so the people who are in that book study is listed there. We meet on Friday mornings, and really have been taking our time to go through the book. My theory is that as we begin to implement change and things, and equity, educational equity into the system, that we had to begin with the curriculum and the resources, the way things are taught, and learn with our curriculum team how to look at curriculum materials, seek out bias, speak the language, so that that they can begin to weave those things into their everyday work with the curriculum and with teachers and administrators. The next one is our workforce. We have established relationship with human resources to really think about who it is who's serving our students, how do we begin to recruit and retain teachers who reflect the demographics of our students. Details about those are also in your packet. Professional learning is a pretty big one that we've been working with. We have to work together to increase our individual and collective knowledge about equity and inclusion, diversity, cultural responsiveness. And so Dr. Gunnell mentioned that we started with our cultural landscapes and allowing the system to understand who exactly it is that we serve in this district. And that could be the foundation for some conversations moving forward.
Do you have copies of that book that might get a copy?
We
or
can provide you a copy.
Basically, I'd like
Yes. And
to-
also,
Did they read that before they read this one about you can't teach what you don't know?
Our
Or,
cultural landscapes was an actual presentation, so it's not a book.
okay, but you have this other,
Yeah, this is a Rana Hammond book.
Okay,
You have
okay.
a few extra copies, yes.
thank you.
So you guys were presented with that information first, and we used an anchor text from Gary Howard, which is a spinoff from the book that you guys read.
Okay.
It was presented to cabinet, principal groups, human resources, secretaries, some paraprofessionals received that training. And then I also was able to, I had been working with parent action leaders. And so then as parents, they were able to have that presentation also. And then we're moving into beginning to talk with leadership about equity, inclusion, and through the Harvard Leadership 3-day seminar that happened this summer, and then we're continuing those themes of equity in principals meetings in our Leading the GRPS Way, where we are being intentional about weaving conversations about equity into the work with the Big Three that the curriculum team is doing with principals, with the understanding that this professional learning, we have to create the infrastructure up top first. So I understand that leadership has to understand and establish a direction from where we're going. From here, we hope to be able to establish leadership teams in the buildings. And then once they're all trained, because each of our buildings has its own unique culture, those leadership teams will be able to begin these same conversations in their building, addressing the unique culture and challenges in their building under our leadership, of course. And then the last one is family and community engagement. So my work began with the parent action leaders, and so everything that I've done in the system with leadership, I've done a version of that for parents, just to begin to have those conversations, to get their feedback, and then also working with Mel Atkins in his office about equity and how that looks in family and community engagement.
So I'm sorry, in the dialogue that you've had with staff, because I'm looking at, district demographic and data, how has the dialogue been with staff in regards to your findings? So, we looked at our staff and our racial makeup is this. What have been the conversations around that?
I mean, staff itself or
Yeah,
staff in relationship to students?
Staff itself. I mean, we know the diversity of our students and so do our staff, but in terms of within the staff, what has been the dialogue in regards to diversity and so forth?
The dialogue is that we know we need to continue to recruit and retain more staff that look like the students that we serve. So that is ongoing work. That's not going to stop.
And so a lot of those, some initiatives that came from that is we are formulated with Human Resources, working on bringing back Young Educator Society. There was some Human Resources spearheading some visits to Michigan State and Wayne State to begin to talk to those teachers there to see if we can just let them know that Grand Rapids is here. And so there's been a lot of conversation amongst us that we really need to attract teachers from programs such as the Urban Educators Program at Wayne to this side of the state for our students.
Now, this isn't the group that works with bullying, and what group has that? We were presented with something with anti-bullying. Is that a part of this at all? No.
No.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, in terms of Howard's book, You Can't Teach What You Don't Know, in regards to white teachers, and it's pretty clear that the majority of our staff are white. How has that conversation, or have you had a conversation with staff in regards to that? I know we want to recruit, but then we have staff that are here.
We're already here, correct. And so.
We want to make sure that they're culturally relevant, that they're cross-cultural. How are you helping
So
that?
with teaching staff, we've not begun to have the same conversations that we're having with leadership right now. I mentioned earlier that we are beginning the learning with the curriculum staff about culturally responsive teaching. We don't want this to be, the whole culturally responsive teaching to be another initiative that sits on top of everything else. The whole idea of equity, diversity, cultural responsiveness has to be woven into everything that we do as a district. So the practices that are going to come out of the study of culturally responsive teaching and equity has to be something that they begin to see in the work that they're doing. And so as we are moving through this work, and it's just beginning, the conversations will begin to be had like they have been, have started with our leadership, with our principals, about equity, about what things we can do to ensure some culturally responsive teaching practices, exactly what are culturally responsive teaching practices to be, and those things will begin to come out in everything that we do. And so there hasn't been a conversation with teaching staff yet saying that this is culturally responsive teaching, but we hope that as we begin to tweak things and change things and have conversations with, from those who are doing PD for teachers, those who are writing curriculum for teachers, that then the conversations will develop and we can push them this way. We know that teachers have a lot on their plate and and we don't want it to feel like it's being something on top of, and it's not something that's on top of. It's the way that we do things. And so we want to develop that understanding that we need to do something different, and here's how we do something different within what we have right now. The one presentation that we have begun to do for staff, with all staff, not just teachers, but those new to the district, is defining equity. So at the beginning of the year, I was able to present educational equity to all of the new staff. And so I had mixed groups. So there were teachers, there were new custodial staff, there maybe have been new secretaries in that room. And so we talked about what educational equity was and what it looks like for them. And we're able to have some of those conversations, and those conversations will continue with new teachers as we move forward. So the conversations are beginning. The need is there, but then allowing everybody to understand that need, and then now what do I do about it that is here? So we're hoping, so back to your original question, Reverend Matias, about the teachers that we already have here, building that understanding and then building their toolbox, so to speak, of the things that they can do, and then really beginning to have those hard conversations about bias and what things we bring as teachers into the classroom that may affect our students is also on the horizon. A group of us have also been trained in unconscious bias to be able to deliver that training. And so we have that foundation that we're continuing to learn about and build upon, that we'll be able to then begin to have that conversation first with leadership, and then it'll begin to flow down into the buildings. And so those are some important conversations to have, just to be able to establish that there is a definite need for change, and the change begins with us as educators.
So if you look at it as layering or the rollout in tiers, you have to have some foundational information before you do the whole work. So it is a process, not something that you can do in one day, and it has to be recursive.
I'm wondering, it would be helpful for the board maybe to either get the presentation or an update on the different levels that you guys are doing. So you're mentioning defining equity that you presented to all staff, and then what you're presenting to teachers in regards to how that relates to classroom engagement and so forth. It would really be helpful for us to understand how you're implementing and going forward and defining some of that.
So that would be part of the strategic plan that we can have you look at.
I did notice that in the presentation here, that a proposal will be submitted to establish administrators we can't lead where we won't go.
So that is a series of mini lessons, again, by Gary Howard. And they really lead from those 5 phases that we learned about in We Can't Teach What We Don't Know, but it's a study for leadership, and it can be done with leadership in their buildings, but I would like to do it with our leadership. And so I'm working on a proposal to present to the executive directors to request time with principals to begin to have those conversations with leadership. So that, so that work hasn't begun yet. It's just something that I would like to suggest.
Yeah, I appreciate you giving us the link to that so that we can look at that. Thanks.
Okay, so in your packet, there's also a graphic at the back that kind of talks about our core work, something that was put together at the end of the year last year, but it really talks about, really focuses on the professional learning that we'd like to have happen. System integration, so we talked about the leadership and infrastructure building first, establishing those leadership teams within the building, and then implementation at the building level. And so the graphic in your packet would be all the way towards the back. It is attachment, just before attachment 3, the last page before attachment 3.
Oh, I see it.
And it just kind of gives a core work overview, understanding that as we learn more and as things develop in the system, this is also being refined and changed. And so we knew that we had to have an understanding of ourselves and the district, which encompasses the who we serve and who are we as stakeholders in this district, and what are we bringing in. So you'll see that our cultural landscapes there, and under who do we serve, and then who am I? So identifying and understanding my culture, and a huge part of what we learned this summer with Harvard. We took some time to write our racial autobiographies, which is the beginning of us thinking about who are we and what are we bringing into the classroom. And so that's the exploring my culture and my story. And many principals have had that conversation with their staffs. But that's something we're going to bring back in, which would lead us to having those conversations about unconscious bias. And then cultural competencies. We, in conjunction with the EL department, also in your packet, have been offering after-school professional learning on understanding the cultures of those immigrant and refugee students who have begun coming in. And so it's offered to anybody who in the district who wants to sign up to come. And so we have several different presenters who speak on everything from culture, the culture of these different nations that are coming, to the trauma that they're bringing with them, and how students experience that trauma, parents experience the trauma, and how it comes out in the classroom, and then the things that we can do as educators to begin to address that trauma. And then along the side there is the written and taught curriculum, so the culture-responsive teaching, and then looking for and recognizing bias in curriculum is something that we will continue to do throughout this entire process. And on the other side, I believe that we have to have some conversations. So we're continuously having conversations within the system, amongst ourselves, reading different things, sharing stuff as we begin to learn, but also with some outside stakeholders, and begin to have an important piece of that I'm working on now is how do we facilitate those difficult conversations that are going to happen in buildings once we really start having these conversations in buildings. And then a last part is really beginning to engage our students in this work also. And I say a last part, but just equally an integral part. And so you also have in that packet the 2017-18 goals. titled that because we penned them in 2017-18, but are aware that these are longer than 1 year to happen. Again, this shift isn't going to happen automatically. It's something that's going to take some time, and we're doing a lot of different things at one time, and so that shift is going to come gradually. And so we had 4 big goals that we began this year, and I anticipate will continue for the next 2.5 years. So understanding who we serve and are exposed to best practices and tools to best serve our students is the first one. Gathering and training advocates for change within our system. And so that's everybody from our district level leadership teams all the way to the leadership teams in buildings. Understanding, recognizing, and responding to bias within ourselves, others, and especially within the curriculum. And then study and begin the integration of best instructional practices for diverse learners, and that's the culture responsive teaching that I mentioned. So in a very short clip, the way that's the work that we've been doing, that we're moving forward. We're happy to answer any questions for you. I know it was really fast, but so we'll open up to questions from you now. There's a lot here in the packet that you have, and it's all organic. Constantly being improved upon, things are being taken out and added to.
Yeah, I think I'm pleased to see that as a district, we're asking ourselves those questions and then helping our staff, parents, and teachers understand, and certainly the city understand, how, in terms of an urban district and a public urban district educational system, how we are dealing with that, and transparency. These are our goals. This is how we're working with these issues, diverse issues in our community. And so I think that it's important that we communicate that, and that every website of our respective schools really has that mission statement, so that at any given point, folks understand the kind of schools that their kids are going to, and some expectation of what they're going to encounter in that. I don't know if you all have any.
Do not.
No, fine, very interesting. Glad it's being done. Thank you.
So the work will continue.
And
Thank you.
continue and continue.
And with that, I believe that we are adjourned. Thank you so much.